Hey everybody, my name is Dave Matfield, and I'm the Creative Director of Presentation Design at VerdanaBold. Today we're going to look at 3 ways to make a data slide more scannable and tell a stronger story. We're going to start by making sure that we're using the right chart to tell the story. Then, we're going to look at how the data is expressed and visualized, making sure that it's streamlined in a way that's easy to understand. And lastly, we're going to add context and make sure the stakes are clear by providing a summary of the data. Okay, here's the slide we're going to look at today. As usual, I like to take a look at the title and see what it can tell me. Most mail segments have declined. This title is pretty light on details. What kind of segments are we talking about? Well, after hunting around the slide, I can confirm that we're talking about the United States Postal Service. And declined in what exactly also kind of took me a minute to find. I can see that the total was $187 billion. So I'm guessing we're talking about mail segments have declined in revenue. The next thing I'd like to know is when. And if I hunt around a little further, I can see that the change happened between 2020 and 2022. So before we even go any further and examine the infographic, I want to change the title. Most USPS mail segments have declined in revenue 2020 to 2022. At first glance, I can see that this is a matrix-style bar chart, where the size of each box is meant to be proportionate to the size of the segment. I notice that they're measuring the segments in terms of volume on the x-axis, and percentage revenue along the y-axis. I did a little bit of research, and I found out that for the United States Post Office, the percentage volume does not necessarily correlate with the percentage revenue. Meaning if we plot the width of these boxes by volume and the height by revenue, we're going to get skewed results. Based on the updated title, the focus of this infographic is going to be revenue. So I'm going to recommend we remove the volume designation completely. With the volume gone, I'm still having a hard time visually comparing the size of these segments. You have very tall, thin segments. You have short, wide segments. Nothing about the way this is laid out lends itself to an easy visual comparison. I'm starting to question whether a matrix-style bar chart is right at all. We might get more bang for our buck with a very basic bar chart. With a basic bar chart, the columns are going to be the same width, and it's easy to compare the size of the values just by the height alone. So when it comes time to redesigning this infographic, I'm going to keep that in mind. Before we get into the redesign, I want to further look at the data. There's still a lot to keep track of here. For each section, we have an absolute dollar amount, we have the slice of the pie relative to the whole, and we have the trend for that segment. There's something about keeping track of a percentage trend over the percentage slice of a pie that makes my brain short-circuit. For this reason, I'm going to recommend removing the percentages that denote the size of each segment. Instead, we're going to focus on the absolute dollar amount and the percentage change over time. Looking further at the data and labels, I think there are pieces that we can streamline in order to cut down on the visual static present on the screen. For starters, I think we can remove the legend and label each segment directly. I also think we can remove the portion denoting the severity of the change. It's using a very well-known color coding system that I don't think needs further explanation. In fact, leaning into the coding and coloring each segment will make the data even more scannable while reinforcing the importance of change over time. The last thing I want to mention before we redesign the infographic is something that I hinted at up front. Based on the data in front of us, I'm left asking, just how much has revenue declined? What was the total revenue in 2020? And what percentage is revenue down overall? Even though these figures are not explicitly stated, we do have the data to figure it out ourselves. So I crunched the numbers and added the information to include in the redesigned graphic. At this point, I think we have all the pieces we're going to need for our redesign. I went ahead and created the infographic ahead of time so we can talk about our solutions. And here's our redesigned infographic. Right up front, I want to mention that I ended up rotating the entire chart 90 degrees to make the best use of the space on the slide. I'm mentioning this in case you want to go back and compare the before and after slides later. As previously mentioned, We changed the chart format from a matrixed bar chart to a more standard bar chart expression to make the visual comparison of the segment sizes easier. We also retained the important data while removing the other figures that were making the audience work too hard. In addition, we leaned into the color coding to make the trend of each segment super easy to scan. And lastly, we added some missing context by providing the total amount of revenue lost and the overall percentage change between 2020 and 2022. We made this section feel visually distinct so that it feels like a supplementary point to the main data. Let's recap what we just did. To make this data viz more scannable, we refined the infographic in 3 ways. We chose the right chart by switching to a format simpler to understand. We simplified the data by streamlining the labels and focusing up the color coding. And we summarized the key data points to give context and gravity to the infographic. If you found this helpful, give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. I wish you the best of luck in taking some of the things we learned here and applying them to your own data visualization. It might take a bit of practice, but I'm confident that you can start creating smarter slides in no time. Thanks for watching.